I remember the exact second the room went still. It was a Tuesday night in the community center, the one they'd built with our dues, and the HOA president, Marlene, was mid-sentence, red-faced, waving a stack of violation notices at me like they were Holy Writ. She was demanding I pay for the emergency repairs to the brand-new access road that had washed out in the flood 2 nights earlier. The road they'd bulldozed straight through the wetlands I'd spent 20 years quietly owning. I didn't raise my voice. I just reached into the inside pocket of my coat, pulled out the folded packet from the Army Corps of Engineers, and slid it across the table so the title page faced her. "Before we talk about who owes whom," I said, "you might want to read the jurisdictional determination dated November 14th. Her lawyer, a guy in a cheap suit who'd been smirking 30 seconds earlier, leaned over. The smirk died somewhere around the 3rd paragraph. Marlene kept trying to talk, but the words weren't coming out right anymore. That was the moment the entire room understood that the pretty little subdivision road they were so proud of had been built, without permits, in federally protected wetlands that still belonged to me. And the flood that had torn it apart overnight wasn't bad luck. It was physics, doing what I knew it would do the day they poured the first yard of fill. Let me take you back to how any of this even became a story. I moved out here in 2008 because I was tired of people. I'd spent 23 years in the Navy, mostly on destroyers, mostly in places where the horizon never changed, and the only thing you could count on was that somebody above you had already decided what your day was going to look like. When I retired at 45, all I wanted was a piece of land nobody could tell me how to live on. My grandmother left me 42 acres on the edge of what was then barely a neighborhood. Mostly pine woods, a 1/4 mile of frontage on a slow river, and 12 acres of jurisdictional wetlands that flooded every spring like clockwork. The soil survey called it Carolina Bay Depressional Wetland, which is a fancy way of saying it holds water exactly the way God intended. I built a small cedar house back in the trees, put in a dock nobody could see from the road, and spent my days fixing old boats and pretending the rest of the world had agreed to leave me alone. For a long time, it worked. The subdivision started creeping closer around 2014. At first, it was just survey stakes and optimistic sale signs that promised estate-sized lots in a gated enclave. I didn't think much of it. I owned everything south of the old logging road, and the wetlands formed a natural buffer nobody in their right mind would try to develop. I even went to one of the early sales meetings out of curiosity. The developer stood up there in his polo shirt and talked about preserving the natural beauty, while showing renderings of McMansions perched on what was clearly my marsh. I raised my hand and asked how they planned to deal with the fact that the only buildable ground in their Phase 3 was federal wetland. The salesman smiled the way people do when they think you're slow and said, "Oh, we have permits for everything." I shrugged and went home. I figured the Corps of Engineers would sort them out long before they ever turned any dirt. They didn't get sorted out. What they got was an HOA board that decided permits were for little people. The first notice showed up taped to my mailbox in the spring of 2019. Bright orange sticker, all caps, unapproved fill material placed in common area. I'd dumped 2 loads of gravel on the old logging trail so I could get my truck back to the house when the ground was soft. The trail had been there since the 1940s. My deed called it out by name as the southern boundary of my property. According to the HOA, that trail was now Oakmont Lane Extension, and therefore under their jurisdiction. They fined me $800 and demanded I remove my gravel at my expense. I laughed, took a picture, and threw the notice in a folder I labeled Future Evidence. Then came the letters about my dock. Then about the height of my grass, then about the fact that I'd parked my John boat on a trailer in my own driveway for more than 48 hours. Every letter ended with the same sentence: "Failure to comply will result in daily accruing fines and possible lien on your property." The absurdity was almost artistic. I say almost because by the sixth letter, I wasn't finding it funny anymore. I tried the polite route first, the way you do when you still believe adults can behave like adults. I emailed the board, politely, attaching my recorded deed, the 1972 plat, and a copy of the tax map that showed my property line running right down the middle of what they were calling Phase 3 common area. I asked for a meeting. Marlene responded with a single sentence: "All exterior modifications require ARC approval." I wrote back pointing out that my land wasn't in the subdivision and therefore not subject to the ARC. Radio silence. 2 weeks later, another find, this one for unauthorized structures in protected wetland. The structure in question was a blue heron. That was when I stopped asking nicely. I spent the next 18 months doing what I used to do in the service when intel was thin and the stakes were high. I built the file. I ordered every document the county had ever created about that parcel. Original deeds back to the 1890s, every survey, every tax card. I paid an environmental consultant to walk the wetlands and flag the boundaries with GPS. I filed a Freedom of Information request with the Army Corps of Engineers for any permit applications related to the subdivision. There weren't any. Not one. What I did find was a letter from the Corps to the developer dated March 2018, warning them that any fill in the wetland would require a Section 44 permit, and none had been issued. The developer had apparently decided that piece of paper belonged in the same file as my polite emails. While I was doing all this, the HOA got bold. They hired a contractor to push a shell rock road straight through the heart of the wetland so the future owners of lots 127 through 142 could get to their $500,000 houses without driving the long way around. I watched them from my dock with binoculars while they graded and filled and compacted like the Clean Water Act was just a suggestion. I took dated photographs every single day. I sent certified letters to the board, to the contractor, to the county. Everybody ignored me. The road went in anyway. 30 feet wide, raised 4 feet above the natural grade, with culverts so small a squirrel would have complained. They even put up a tasteful little sign that said, "Oakmont Preserve, a private community." My wife asked me more than once if I was sure I wanted to do this. We'd been through enough moves, enough stress. She just wanted peace. I told her I wanted it too, but peace has a price, and sometimes the price is making the people who stole it give it back. The flood came in September of 2023. We'd had rain on and off for 2 weeks, nothing apocalyptic, just steady North Carolina fall rain. The wetland did what wetlands do. It filled up. The little culverts clogged with pine straw in about 6 hours. By midnight, the water was lapping at the roadbed. By dawn, the shell rock had liquefied, and half the road was floating in chunks toward the river. The video I took from my dock went viral on the local Facebook groups. Not because I posted it. Someone else did, but you could actually watch a brand new BMW try to ford what used to be Oakmont Lane and disappeared to the roofline in brown water. The HOA emergency meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Which brings us back to the community center. I walked in 10 minutes late on purpose. The room was packed, maybe 60 residents. Some of them ankle-deep in outrage, some just scared because their driveways were now islands. Marlene was holding court at the tabletop, talking about declaring a special assessment to rebuild the road the right way this time. Someone had already printed new violation notices demanding that I contribute my fair share since I was the only resident who refused to participate in community governance. I waited until she paused for breath. I didn't stand on ceremony. I just walked to the table and laid the core packet down like I was dealing a card. Then I laid the second packet on top of it, my original deed with the meets and bounds description that explicitly included the wetland. Then the third, the certified letter from the Corps dated 3 days after the flood, stating that the road constituted an unpermitted discharge of fill material into waters of the United States, and that removal would be required within 90 days. The room got very quiet. Marlene tried to bluff. She said a lot of words very quickly about easements and prescriptive rights, and how the HOA had maintained that road for years. Her lawyer tried to help, except he'd just realized the maintenance they were talking about had lasted exactly 4 months and been performed entirely without permission on land none of them owned. I let him talk until they ran out of air. Then I said the only